Hello, my name is Haley Adams, and I am a PhD candidate in computer science at Vanderbilt University. Today, I am happy to present my work titled Depth Perception in AR, the Effects of Display, Shadow, and Position, which was conducted under the tutelage of Bobby Bodenheimer, Sarah Creem-Regehr, and Jeanine Stefanucci.
At present, we have evidence that augmented reality head-mounted displays can influence people's perception of space, but we don't completely understand how or why this happens. This is a problem because many applications for AR require accurate spatial perception. As such, our goal for this project was to better understand how the type of augmented reality display and the way virtual objects are presented in these displays affect people's depth perception judgments. For our investigation, we used the Microsoft HoloLens 2, an optical see-through display, and the Varjo XR-3, a video see-through display. Both devices are state-of-the-art for their respective display categories. The Varjo XR-3 is a video see-through display with a weight of 980 grams and a field of view of 115 by 90 degrees. In contrast, the Microsoft HoloLens 2 is a lightweight optical see-through display that provides a full unobstructed view of the real world, but only has an augmented field of view of approximately 43 by 29 degrees. I have a more detailed breakdown of the differences between these displays in our paper, but for the sake of today's discussion, I want to mention these two specifications because although we do not directly manipulate weight and field of view in this study, prior research in virtual reality HMDs have shown that weight and field of view are contributing factors to depth underestimation. There is some evidence that people's depth judgments in video see-through and optical see-through AR are similarly underestimated within action space, which covers a range of distances between 2 and 30 meters approximately. But few studies have directly compared perception between different AR head-mounted displays, which complicates comparisons across studies. We also look at height of virtual targets in AR. For applications, developers may present virtual objects as floating above the ground to make gazing at overlays more comfortable. For example, Google Maps AR and RoboRay do this. And perhaps because of that, much of the prior research investigating depth perception in AR has used floating virtual targets alone for assessment. We believe the decision to evaluate floating targets alone may have an undesired effect on people's depth judgments in these studies because the human visual system treats floating objects as though they are located on the ground plane. As a result, floating targets are typically perceived as farther away. However, prior research in completely virtual environments has shown that this effect can be mitigated when a surface contact cue like cast shadow is present. Motivated by these findings, a growing body of depth perception research in AR has looked at how the presence of a cast shadow can influence relative depth judgments when virtual targets are floating. But thus far, none of this research has evaluated judgments to grounded targets, which makes it impossible to interpret the relationship between cast shadow and height above the ground with these studies alone. Given this prior research, we developed 4 hypotheses. First, targets will be underestimated in both AR devices. Second, when a shadow is present, people's distance judgments will be underestimated less. Third, there will be an interaction between shadow and target height such that there will be a difference between floating and grounded objects without shadows, but no difference when shadows are present. Lastly, because weight and field of view are known factors for distance underestimation in VR, we predicted that the video see-through display would induce more distance underestimation than the optical see-through display. To address our hypotheses, we utilized a within-subjects factorial design with display, shadow shading, target height, and target distance as factors. Distance judgments were obtained through an absolute measure of distance perception, verbal report, and targets were presented at 3, 4.5, and 6 meters. We reduced potential learning effects between display conditions by moving participants to the opposite side of the room for the second part of the study. We then used a linear mix effects model to investigate the influence of shadow, target height, and device on people's depth judgments. Our results showed that distance judgments across both displays were underestimated, a finding that supports our first hypothesis. This result reinforces a growing body of literature in AR head-mounted displays that has found distance estimates in action space to be underestimated. In support of H4, We found that participants were more accurate at estimating distances in the HoloLens 2 than in the Varjo XR-3, with an average of approximately 15% underestimation in the HoloLens 2 and 20% underestimation in the Varjo XR-3. Based on VR literature, it's possible that this difference was influenced by weight and field of view differences between the two HMDs, but this theory will need more research to confirm. We also found a significant effect of shadow presence or absence on depth judgments, confirming H2, in which we predicted that cast shadows would improve depth perception. Our experiment did not find an interaction of height and shadow as we had hypothesized. However, we did see a main effect of height. Two interpretations of this result are possible. First, it may be that people found it more difficult to assess floating targets in general, regardless of the presence of a shadow. This result is in line with research and video see-through displays by Kaito et al., which found that people's confidence in depth judgments was worse for floating targets that were higher above the ground, in their case, a half meter versus a meter. Alternatively, verbal report measures are known to be more variable than other distance measures, and they can be susceptible to anchoring effects. Given that the magnitude of the effect of cast shadows we saw was smaller than expected, it's possible that the lack of interaction here was due to the use of verbal report in our experiment. In future research, it will be beneficial to look at floating targets that are positioned higher off the ground and to explore additional measures of depth perception judgments, since different measures rely on different perceptual representations.
In conclusion, people underestimated distances in both displays, and distance underestimation was more severe in the Varjo XR-3 than the Microsoft HoloLens 2. Although we found effects of both shadow and height as perceptual theory and previous work would predict, we did not find the predicted interaction between object height and the presence of cast shadow, which is a fruitful topic for future investigation. For now, thank you for listening to my presentation. I look forward to your questions at the end of the session.